Hello, everyone. My name is Shil Patel. Today, we're all here to go over this webinar, which includes strategies for success on level and step 1. And we'll also talk a little bit about OMM. A little bit about myself. My name is Shil. I'm one of the DOs. I graduated from LECOM, Bradenton campus. I really enjoyed going there, and I really loved my time there, especially the OMM. However, I decided to go for a general surgery residency. I finished my general surgery residency just this year in 2021 from Detroit, and I'm currently in Lexington, Kentucky, doing a cardiothoracic fellowship. I am here to talk about how I was successful, what I can offer you as a part of Blueprint and Cram Fighter and medical school tutor amalgamation, and just what can we do to get successful. So let's get started. Just a little bit about Blueprint and what Blueprint is all about. It uses several different resources. It's pretty much a hub of many different resources. Some of them include a Cram Fighter study plan. Also, as I mentioned, that I belong to medical school tutors. We do a lot of tutoring, and in addition to tutoring, we also provide a lot of residency consulting. If you have a specific residency you're interested in and you need just someone to bounce off ideas or help you, this is what we help you with. In addition to all of these, the Blueprint Prep also provides access to Rosh Review, not only exam question banks, but also helps you get ready for any kind of shelf or any other examinations for that purposes. As I already mentioned myself, as I already introduced myself, my name is Sheila once again. As a part of medical school tutors, I'm one of their senior USMLE COMLEX tutors, and I'm also a residency consultant. So I pretty much do a lot of residency consultation in general surgery, but I can help out with other residencies as well. So now that the introductions are done, let's talk about what we will talk about tonight. The most important thing for me as during med school was to figure out how to use my assessment scores when I was taking NBMEs or NBOMEs. So that's what we'll talk about a little bit. We'll also talk about what are the best resources to use, and most importantly, how to avoid getting overwhelmed. You know, we come across so many resources nowadays that it's very easy to get overwhelmed and not be able to realize what should we use and what we shouldn't. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we will also talk about what are the points and what are the things you could use to create a cohesive study schedule, common mistakes to avoid when you're studying or just making your schedule for future studying. And then we'll spend a little bit of time on tips to excel in OMM. And then at the end, we'll leave back some time for Q&As. So let's start with, what does the NBME first score mean? So when you first take the NBME score, this by no means tells you this is how you're going to do on your USMLE or your COMLEX for that matter. It's pretty much an initial measure of where you stand at that point in time in your fund of knowledge and your ability to apply everything that you've learned so far to the questions that are being asked. Of course, you know, everyone has told us, and we know that there is a very high correlation between NBME scores and step 1. However, we know that when we first take, or we recommend when you first take the NBME scores, you're not so close to the exams that you don't have time to adapt your study schedule to put into perspective about everything that you have learned from the NBME scores. So think of the NBME scores as pretty much being a background. It will tell you where you are at that point and what you need to apply to be successful and get to your goal scores. Your goal is to use the dedicated study period to steadily and eventually increase your NBME score. So just remember, the first NBME score will determine the amount of time and quantity and also quality of your step 1 prep. So Here comes the COMLEX checklist, right? When we talk about DOs, when we talk about OMM, there are a couple things that do not coincide with USMLEs. Some of the COMLEX checklists that we can talk about include UWorld and First Aid. Those will help you not only with USMLE, but also with COMLEX testing. However, the UWorld does not include OMM knowledge. So you need to make sure that you remember to put in some extra time to make sure that you get those points. Every COMLEX has about 5 to 10% of OMM on it. And these are very easy points. And this could be something that you have in your pocket from early on so that you can be sure that you get those points. Some of the question banks that some of the schools, DO schools may offer, or you may have come across during your school, include ComBank and ComQuest. The primary purpose of these question banks is to get familiar with the OMM questions rather than use them as a basic content. When I was studying for USMLE and COMLEX, I mostly relied on UWorld and added all my knowledge of UWorld or whatever question banks I was going through with the help of First Aid. And if I was lacking in any of the fields, then I would go back and actually refer to the textbooks so that you can make sure that you know that topic inside out. The primary goals remain the same. Whenever you are doing any COMLEX specific question bank, make sure you go through all the OMM questions. And then no matter whether you're studying for COMLEX or USMLE or both, make sure you make it a point to go through UWorld at least once. Some of the primary resources, as we've already talked about, and you will see them off and on and hear a lot about them, is First Aid. The reason why First Aid is so talked of is because it's a pocket guide of everything that you will come across and will be important in your step 1 preparation. I think this book should be used as much as possible as an aid to USMLE and UWorld prep. And then we'll talk about a little bit ahead as to how we can use the First Aid to supplement the UWorld questions. But some other primary resources, as we already talked about, are ComBank and ComQuest, and this can help you with OMM questions. When we talk about primary resources, those are just the resources that will get you familiar with the topics. However, what do you do when you don't know the topic? That's when the secondary resources come in. And these include more detailed textbooks like physiology textbook or a pathology rapid review book. And most importantly, when we talk about OMM, the Savarese book, which is the OMT review, is one of a great resource to have just to get a brief overview on OMM topics. So now that we know our primary and secondary resources, how do we use them? We recommend, and I recommend anytime I tutor my students, is to layer the resources. What does that mean? So start with a First Aid chapter to get a scope of the content. Based on that chapter, do some USMLE questions. And then when you get the answer right or wrong, use that information to supplement whatever you have read in the First Aid textbooks. And if you feel that you still don't have a grasp of that topic, then either go back to First Aid and see if you missed anything, or move forward and see if you can actually refer to one of the secondary sources and get more information about the topics you missed. So this is when the supplemental topics and materials videos become very helpful, because they will help you gain further knowledge in the topics that you felt were lacking. So let's put it all together. Let's talk about if you were to ideally come up with your dedicated study period. What does it include? There should be 3 phases of the study period. The early phase, when you are probably months out, middle phase, when you're weeks out, and late is when you're days out. So when you're in your early phase, one of the few things that you will focus on is UWorld questions and First Aid. And then you can use COMSAs or NBMEs to get your baseline score, which will help you determine how much are you going to work, or what you're going to do, or what topics you're going to focus on. Then comes, and you keep doing that until you're in the middle phase of your study period. When you're in your middle phase of study period, you do more questions of UWorld, you again supplement it with First Aid, So either annotate all your issues or stuff that you don't know in the first date or vice versa, and find a way to use both of these resources together to make sure you have more information about this topic. And then in the middle phase, you also add on OMM topics. So that way you also have a grasp on this topic so that you can get those 5 to 10% of points, which will help you increase your score. In this middle phase, we also recommend, or all of us have when we were taking our USMLE and COMLEX and doing our prep, have done it, is take at least one per week NBME or COMSA just to see how much progression have you made. If you feel like you haven't progressed at all, then what do you need to change? How do you need to change? What do you need to do? And then here's the time when you minimize. So try not to go to a lot of other resources. Just stick to these 3 and some NBME topics. So next comes the late phase, which is days before. So here you will work on doing the questions until you are done with UWorld. Then you will add on to first aid and look through the topics which you think were confusing or you annotated quite a bit. So you know that those were the topics that you struggled with while you were taking your UWorld questions. And here comes when you can actually take NBME once a week again, probably not more than once a week, because it is a 3 to 4 hour test and does take quite a bit of time. So we recommend about 1 per week, and then review your questions and see where you stand. And then towards the end, either before you take OMM before you take your COMLEX, or just while you're preparing for your USMLE, if you're going to take COMLEX, then work and think about doing OMM questions and finish reviewing those questions. Next comes developing a study plan. So, the most important part of the study plan is to establish objectives for each system. What this means is that every system, body organ system that you are going to work on, you need to figure out what do you aim to learn out of that? What did you think that you missed while you were going through that system during your med school? You need to figure out a calendar that you will use to help you study. Coming from Blueprint Prep, Crime Fighter has a pretty good calendar that helps you organize your schedule. So you can either do that or do math yourself and divide the systems and objectives appropriately and come up with a study plan. The study plan is very important, especially for all the tests that we will be taking for the rest of our lives, just to keep us focused and make sure that we do everything that we need to do that day. Also, once you come up with this plan, look through it and make sure it's doable. We all come from varied backgrounds. We're all going to be doctors or are doctors, and we know that we can do it. However, you need to think about day-to-day living. There are going to be things that will come up. There are going to be days when you're not going to be able to catch up. So just make sure that when you do come up with a study plan, you account for time and days when you're not going to be able to do certain part of your study plan. This is something that we came up with together as a part of MSD as what a sample dedicated timeline should look like. And we already talked about this. However, if you are wondering what a sample study plan would look like, this is what we would think and hope that your study plan looks like too, with like 1 or 2 NBMEs a week, especially in the middle section of your study plan. And then several different topics, which are either distributed system-wise or just focusing on one system a day or something along those lines. So you will have to figure out a study plan that works best for you and your learning habits. Most important is the fact that you have to do the math and determine, is it feasible? Are my goals realistic? You have to be honest with yourself now while you're making this study plan to see if you set realistic goals. You cannot think that you will do a lot of things and overestimate your capacity to study. As I already mentioned, it's very, very important to have time built in to be flexible. There are going to be days when you're going to be very productive. There are going to be days when you won't be productive. So make sure you have that time built in to make sure that you don't fall behind in your study plan. Other couple important things are going to be, are you studying so much that you're burning yourself out? Are you giving yourself time to work out, to go spend time with family, to go do things that will prevent you from burning out? You also need to keep in mind that while you are working and studying this hard, is it a quality studying that you're doing over quantity studying? So the tips that I can think of that may help you to reach your best score is, most importantly, don't agonize over the pages of first aid. First aid is a reference. It helps you. It by no means is to be memorized from first page to last page. Do not use too many resources. As you come along, as you talk to your colleagues, as you talk to your mentors, a lot of resources are going to come up. However, it's up to you to decide which 2 or 3 resources are going to be the best for you and stick to them. Do not start changing resources at the last minute, because that's the worst thing you can do, because it will just cause confusion and take you away from what's important. Also remind yourself that you won't remember everything in UWorld right away. And that's why we recommend first pass most definitely through UWorld, and then attempt a second pass if you can through UWorld. And again, as I've already mentioned repeatedly, that your schedule will and must change. So account for flexibility and catch up if you fall behind. Also, do not overstudy a topic. Just because you feel like you're weak in a topic, don't use days to study that topic. Move on. Make sure you keep in mind about all the high yield topics that could potentially come your way, and don't waste time on trying to learn about minor details that may not come across in your tests. The next question that sometimes gets asked when we talk about all this is, how do we use UWorld effectively? The best way to think about it is that it's a learning tool. It helps you to learn. It's not an assessment tool. You have to start thinking of UWorld as a way to help you to learn different topics, not necessarily tell you how you have been doing on different topics. You have to consider repeating all the incorrect questions, and think about making a flashcard. And what that means is that just find one takeaway point per question and use that to make a flashcard. That one takeaway point might be a very high yield topic, or it could be something that you felt like you just did not remember or could not remember. And then you could use notes function, or you could use Excel spreadsheet to do that, or you could just make handwritten flashcards or flashcard apps. So after we talked about all of this, let's talk a little bit about how to dissect a USMLE question. So you have this question here, and I'm going to read it for all of you. A 55-year-old alcoholic male is hospitalized with severe abdominal pain associated with nausea and vomiting. You have laboratory studies which shows marked elevation of amylase and lipase. During the hospitalization, his condition deteriorates and he develops severe respiratory distress. There are crackles bilaterally on physical exam. The patient is placed on mechanical ventilation, however, fails to respond at 100%, and soon after dies because of worsening respiratory insufficiency. Which of the following autopsy findings are you most likely going to find? Can people respond as to what they think is the right choice? Okay, so let's talk about how you could answer this question. The most important thing when any questions get asked in UWorld or USMLE, you have to think about what are the important parts of this question. The question is going to be long. We're all used to it based on UWorld and just being in med school. What is the gist of this question? So a couple of important things that are important to answer this question have been underlined, including it was an alcoholic male. He came in with severe abdominal pain. We noted an elevated amylase and lipase, and he developed severe respiratory distress. So what do we think this patient has? So this becomes a secondary or tertiary level question because they're not only asking you to figure out what the diagnosis is, but they're also trying to find out if you remember the pathology findings associated with this. And someone answered saying that it's B, which I agree with. It is the right answer. And the diagnosis in this case is acute respiratory distress syndrome, ARDS. We hear about it all the time. However, this question is not asking you the diagnosis. It's asking you what is the pathology that leads to this diagnosis. So USMLE questions are notorious for being second and third order. So you not only have to understand the question, but you also have to be able to tell them what is the answer as a result of that question. So now we will switch gears a little bit and talk about OMM. I mentioned OMM throughout my entire topic. I'm sorry I did not talk about what OMM means since we had a whole PowerPoint slide on it. So OMM is a very integral part of DO curriculum. It is osteopathic manipulative medicine or osteopathic manipulative techniques. It is defined as a therapeutic application of manual pressure or force. This is a very, very important topic for everyone taking COMLEX because it makes up 10% of your COMLEX exam. And these are very easy points if you take adequate time to prepare for it. So when you come across just like you come across USMLE questions, you're going to come across OMM questions. And just based on our experience and based on different exams that we have come across, there are 3 different ways to post OMM questions. So the 3 different ways that we come across is, first of all, they'll give you a vignette about some pathology with a short explanation of OMM finding, and then they will have an OMM question. So what this means is that that OMM finding they're giving you at the end of the vignette is the key to answering this OMM question. The second way they will come up with OMM question will be they'll give you some OMM details. However, these OMM details are not necessary to answer the question that's asked of you. They're just there to help you point to a certain diagnosis. However, they may not necessarily help you answer the question. And then the third one is a straightforward OMM finding, and it asks you either diagnosis or a clinical detail or asks of you how to treat. Some of the OMM resources, and I know we have gone over it in plenty detail yesterday or earlier today, is the OMM review books such as Severisi. There are 2 versions of it. The one that I used was a 3rd edition, and they may have already come out with the 4th edition. However, these textbooks are really, really good resource book, as they are pretty much a review on the important topics in OMM, and also have a few questions and answers towards the end of each chapter so that you can review whatever you learned. Other sources are NBME question banks, and then also ComBank and ComQuest. This is one of the high yield topic cheat sheet that us as medical school tutors came up with. And this is a very good cheat sheet because it highlights some of the things that you are going to have to know while you prepare for your COMLEX examination. One of the things that you may not use as much in real life while you're learning OMM, but you get asked plenty in the exam, is cranial motion. The other one is viscerosomatic innervations. So pretty much talk about the sympathetic levels, and they also talk about which organs does it innervate, and so on and so forth. So it's a nice cheat sheet to have, and I'm sure it's available through Blueprint Prep to be able to review OMM factors while you're in your last few days before your before your COMLEX exam. Some of the topics to watch out for, which means that know these topics inside out, upside down. And the reason why I say that is because you will at least see a question or 2 in regards to these topics, because these are even used even in day-to-day life. Sometimes when you are in primary care medicine, or even when you are dealing with surgery patients, you'll sometimes think and look back and think, oh, I remember this point because this is the Chapman point that I came across. And counter strain techniques and all that we learned during our med school. So some of these topics that include that you should definitely know include Chapman points, viscerosomatic reflex, counter strain. When it comes to ribs, you have to know the difference between the two different movements, which are the pump handle and the bucket handle. And I have seen several questions being asked just based on the movements of the ribs. So those are easy points yet again. And then you also have to know how to diagnose inhaled versus exhaled dysfunction and muscle groups that are engaged by each segment of the ribs. And, as we already talked about previously in that cheat sheet, know how the craniosacral movements work, because I can almost guarantee that you will see a question or two in regards to that movement on your final test. So now let's review an OMM question. So again, remember I told you there are going to be 3 potential ways that they could ask. So this is one of the ways that the question has been framed. They give you a female that comes in with a generalized abdominal pain. They give you her vital signs. And then they give you, she's in moderate distress. However, she has a rubbery nodule palpated in the 7th intercostal space. So they give you all of this information. Physical exam is pretty vague, except for this OMM finding that they're presenting in front of you. And then they're asking you which of the following is most likely to be present in this patient. Appendicitis, cholecystitis, infectious mono, pancreatitis, or gastritis. Okay, someone answered D. So that is correct. So this is one of very good tables that I used when I was trying to get used to my Chapman points, anterior and posterior. And as you can see that there are different intercostal spaces and in different ribs that are associated with different organs. So in this case, the 7th rib they're talking about. So in this case, the patient has pancreatitis. That's why you feel that rubbery nodule in the 7th rib head. So good job. Some of the OMM tips that I can think of and want to pass along is review the high yield before the test. I would say read Savarese, the OMM review book, at least once, preferably twice, because that's your only review book and your cheat book, if you must say. Do questions focused on OMM, high yield and easy points to get on COMLEX, so go for it. And then you can definitely consider us as a part of Blueprint Prep to help you out in the process if you have any questions or concerns. Just wanted to put a slide out there just talking about the CRAM Fighter and what CRAM Fighter offers. As I said, it's a study prep schedule, so you can use that to help you plan how your future studies are going to go. And then one important thing I wanted to bring up was we get asked quite a bit if there are ways to be ambassadors. You have an opportunity to be a campus brand ambassador, which means that you can not only get discounts yourself, but you can also earn rewards and help your classmates get access to these websites and these opportunities. I'm hoping this was helpful, and we're open to any questions that you may have. I will try my best to answer these questions. So there were a couple questions. Is first aid better than Kaplan? So my experience of Kaplan was that they are a good review, definitely a good review resource. However, they come up with several different textbooks based on different organ systems that you're talking about. I'm not sure if that has changed. The first aid is better because it's one textbook that talks about all the different systems. The second thing I like about first aid, it says short and concise rather than sentences that you were talking about, so you can annotate it quite easily. I don't think one is better versus the other. I just think it depends on what you like. However, I do stand by first aid because that's what I used for my study prep. One of the other questions that's being asked is, do you have any tips on how to reduce burnout with studying resources? One of the ways I reduced my burnout with the studying resources is by finding 2 things, 3 things that work with you and sticking with it. Just know that as you talk to your colleagues and your coworkers, as the time at the time of the test comes closer, everyone's going to be using different things, but don't get tempted by it. Just have faith in your own resources, and I'm sure it will work. Someone is wondering if a first aid PDF to save time or written notes on the actual book. Again, I can talk from my experience. I'm a person who likes to write what I'm reading just to feel like I'm putting it into perspective and inscribing in my mind. So I like to write, but it definitely up to you whether you think annotating on a first aid PDF is better for you or writing is better for you. Sorry, I'm getting a good amount of questions. I'm just trying to see what will be most helpful. Should we schedule a review day in the dedicated study time? I definitely think a review day is not a bad idea in the dedicated study time. However, when you are in your early and your middle portion of your study plan, there will be a lot of topics to catch up on. So I don't think that's an accurate time or appropriate time to do a review day. I would plan for review day to review topics towards the end of your study planning so that everything that you have learned so far can be reviewed. How early is too early to start studying for step 1? Just know that you're studying for step 1, whether you realize it or not, the day you start med school, just because it's one of the first biggest tests you're going to take. I would say the most appropriate time to dedicate your study time to step 1 is about 6 months in advance, just so that you have given it enough time. Another one question that I have is, I'm using videos, but it takes way too long to go through. Should I use question banks? And first aid, I feel like I'm missing out if I don't use other resources. Once again, I'm going to stick to what I said. There are going to be a lot of resources out there that you feel like are helping you if you use them. Videos work if you feel like they're helping you. However, to make sure that you get the gist of your studying or gist of the high-yield topics, I strongly recommend QBank and first aid. I think one thing everyone has to convince themselves is everything that you need to know, everything that potentially can be asked in the USMLE, majority of the times, you will cover in QBank, in the UWorld QBank and first aid. So besides that, I do not think you need any other topics unless you're going to other resources just to get a better understanding of a particular topic. And then one of the final questions that we have is, do you have any tips to improve your score within a short period of time, that is weeks before a comp exam? Unfortunately, I don't think I have any particular topics that will help you increase or improve your score within a short period of time. I would say you should once again try, even though you have a shorter time, you should still try to come up with a study plan and try to stick to it, and use as much time as you have available while ensuring you have time to be flexible and spend time with family, and also to make sure you don't burn out. And keep taking the NBMEs on a weekly basis to make sure your study plan is helping you improve. Which topic should I start? Because I'm in a dilemma as to where to start. I think one of the first topics that everyone should cover is the topic that they feel they are the weakest in. That's one of the topics that you will not want to cover just because you know you're weak in it. So start with that. These are some really, really good questions, and I hope I'm answering it in a way that's giving you a perspective as to how you want to approach your prep or your study habits in the next few months to weeks. Are there any other questions? One of the other questions was that, do you know if there are any vouchers available for any for the NBME exams? I don't think I myself am aware of any vouchers available for NBME exams. I'm not sure if my blueprint prep person that's here with me can help me answer that. I think I've tried my best to answer these questions. I hope this webinar was useful for you guys. I just want to take this time to wish you guys good luck. And if you ever feel like you need more help or need more assistance in determining how to proceed, then please think of us. Good luck and have a good night, you guys.